Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is an extremely exciting day for me. Number one, because I am finalizing the last 2 pages of blue sketch for my comic. But this is not all. I don't believe I talked to you about it before. However, last summer I enrolled in Foundations of Concept Art, which I'm concluding actually this week. I've learned a lot. It was my first time ever taking proper art education. Throughout this period, or where I was part of the course, I learned so much about perspective, composition, storytelling, so many tips and tricks that it really opened my eyes to the mistakes that I've been making and the mistakes I can see also in the comic book pages that I currently have. So before I actually transition into inking those, I will try to, of course, correct as much as I can with what I currently have and with the skill set that I at this point in time possess. This made me think that maybe I'm not the only one who has been guilty of making these art mistakes, and I hope with this video I get to share them with you. So maybe you'll learn something and we can all see how we can improve. The first mistake I've been guilty of making is not having proper references. I know this is the type of advice that you hear all over art channels. However, what my school taught me is something I don't hear anywhere else online. And this is the importance of making your references yourself. The school had industry professionals basically as mentors. We got to learn directly from these professionals and hear how they would approach drawing an illustration. And I learned how much research actually happens before they attempt to do anything. And this research actually also happens at this reference phase, where if they are planning to draw a particular scene in a, let's say, nighttime, they would go out to really act out this scene in the nighttime, to take the photos, take the videos, to have the references, have the exact information they need. Now, of course, this is not something that all of the professionals do. However, when we were asked to do this for our own projects, I can guarantee you that when I was doing or taking the extra step to, put the object under lighting that I was trying to do, or act out the scene myself, take the photos and see how my body looks like, my facial features, how the folds of the clothing act. This has been always my best work that I've done so far. It's truly opened my eyes to realizing that the creative process of drawing an illustration can actually happen before you put pen to paper. And I've seen so many creative ideas of how people went about creating those references, from making paper cuts of the lighting scheme of the rooms to using just like regular trinkets and objects in the house, putting it under the light. And it has truly been the most eye-opening moment to realize, okay, there are things all around me which I can use to make informed decisions for my art. So wanted to put that one first. So try out, make your own references. You will see that instead of spending hours online trying to find the right pose or the right scene, making them yourself changes how you think and how you approach art. This was the first mistake that I've been guilty of, and now I know better, so I have no excuses to continue doing it. The second mistake, perspective. Perspective was this one area which for me is very abstract. I struggle with it, not in a sense when you have the practice session of drawing the object in space. So you have your horizon line, you have your vanishing points, and then you draw boxes. For me, the problem occurs when I have to translate this geometry to an actual drawing that I'm trying to do. This was one of my most common mistakes, basically, that with most of my pieces there was something off about the perspective, and either I was having clashing perspectives, so I drew one object in one type of perspective, the other in other, or just not properly understanding how an object reacts in the perspective in space sort of flattened out my image, and I was actually struggling to create the depth of the atmosphere. And I think for me, the biggest challenge coming out of this course is to continue to practice this. And the advice the mentor in school gave me was basically to really take a little sketchbook with me and just observe and try to capture the objects, capture the distance of what I'm seeing, because this internal feeling that the professional artists have is because they've been doing it for so long and they've got just a natural sense, okay, this is off, because they've seen it, they've paid attention to so many of these drawings that they did, that they develop this internal click when something feels off, even if you don't want to be drawing perspective grids. However, this is something that I will be continuing to practice, and I'll show you, because there is a lot of actual perspective mistakes in my current comic, which I hope to address before we put ink on them. Mistake number 3 is scaling of the objects in relation to one another. I think this sort of comes as a consequence of my lack of understanding of perspective. However, I was never truly aware how the objects in the scene can tell a lot more about what you're seeing and inform the viewer about the discrepancies when something throws you off. It's right there in the scene with the objects that you've placed in the narrative. And it was really interesting for me to learn that this scaling issue has been a reoccurrence with me. Let me give you an example. In one of my first projects, I was drawing a room with some stuff inside, and I put like a helmet, a bunch of like random objects, and these objects were rather big. Like I was drawing something that was plus minus accurate in perspective, but the scale was off. If you have an object that resides in the distance but is of equal size that the objects you have at your front, it basically implies that this object is humongous, because when you look down in the space, the further something is, the smaller and tinier it gets. And it's the little things of how specific elements within the composition you're trying to pull off can inform one another. And for example, there was another project where I had a fire pit, and next to a fire pit, a cave entrance. And my fire pit was basically bigger than the cave entrance. So either I was implying that, why would there be such a huge fire pit? There are giants here sitting, which means that the cave entrance should be a lot bigger, or that, if the cave is so small, why would I have such a big fire pit? Things like that. I mean, it seems kind of obvious when I say it, but in the moment of drawing, you really need to take a step back and question each object you place in a scene, how it relates to the rest of the scene and how it informs the scene. Because in the end, it can throw off the piece. It can really imply certain things that, if your intention is not there, that of course you go back and fix that. So scale of objects in relation to the scene, basically my mistake number 3. Okay, the fourth mistake. What was the fourth mistake? Yes, the fourth mistake is basically not understanding the purpose of the object. So I think this is something that happens when you're drawing something without a proper understanding of how it is used in real life. I can say confidently that I've made this mistake multiple times while trying to draw armor, because I do not actually understand how specific elements of the armor are connected. And this is where the research happens. So we were constantly told in the course that if you're drawing something for the very first time, read up on it, see how it functions, see what it is, try to understand what is it made out of, how it would behave, how it acts under the light, how actually it feels like. So if you have, let's say, a museum that potentially has a suit of armor, go to that museum, have a look, try to see. And I will give you the most obvious mistake that I've made is, for example, with the helmet. When I draw helmets, or back in the course when I attempted to draw the helmets on a person, I would sort of draw them as if they're like sitting straight on their head. And in real life, armor would never go directly on your skin. You would never have like plain armor touching your skull, because one hit to the helmet would basically bore into your skull. So there was always padding. But visually, you ought to depict that. This type of understanding and information can help you draw things as they are. And we're not talking here about style, we're talking about the accuracy of what you're trying to depict. Each object has a volume, and this volume takes up space, on the body as well. So when I think of, for example, the other mistake that I've been making with conceptualizing design is that you have to think not only of does it look cool, but what purpose does it have? What purpose does it serve? For example, I had a suit of armor for one of my characters that I tried to make interesting with a particular pattern on the shoulder pads. However, when you really think about it in the field of battle, these things wouldn't serve anything. These things would actually be a hindrance to the person in the armor, because an axe, a sword can get stuck in the design that I was making. And then me implying that this would be an armor of a general makes it even more silly, because why would a general want to have something like that? When you're drawing an object for the first time, do the research to understand what this object is made of, how it acts, how it behaves, and how it reacts or relates to the situation that you're trying to put it in. My final mistake that I've been guilty of making are tangents. Tangents are when lines and creations that you've drawn are interacting in a very awkward, narrow kind of way that creates visual tension, and it just throws you off, flattens out the image, and you lose the depth and looks weird. I've actually have been guilty of making a lot of those in my comic as well, and especially because there are different types of tangents. Where one says where you have the two objects close enough, when the balance is off, or when you cut off the image, let's say at a really awkward point. And I have a couple of panels that actually do exactly that. So the way you would resolve this is you would either resize the objects in the scene, you would overlap them instead of having them just narrowly touch each other. You can of course expand the canvas, so then both objects have enough space to coexist without creating this visual tension. So this is something that now that I have the knowledge of, I can go back, look at my sketches, and make a conscious decision on how I will fix those, because this is the beauty of having a sketch that is still not final, and there is still time and room for me to correct it. Lastly, I wanted to give you an update on those pencils I got from my last video that you saw. These were actually non-photo blue pencils designed for sketching. I've been testing them out. Unlike a regular blue pencil that I was using before, these are much softer. They glide on the paper. You can't get really crisp, sharp edges for a very long time because they're just so soft and creamy. But they're so easily erasable, even with my hard pressing problem. I've been able to erase them. So these truly are made for that, and I've been having a good time. With that said, this would conclude today's video. I hope you guys learned something. I hope this was informative. If you would like me to talk more about the references and how you can make your own references, the techniques that I've learned, if you want me to talk about any of these mistakes and tips and tricks, or just the concept art school and my experience, let me know. I'm happy to make that video for you. Other than that, the next phase is inking. I've been practicing slowly some inking techniques just to warm up, because we are truly now embarking on the next stage of this comic book project, and I couldn't be more excited. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all of your support. If you enjoyed this video, if you want to follow my journey, consider to subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Ciao!